Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new The Changemaking podcast with Chloé Messdaghi. Each episode will introduce an area of technology that needs work and highlight the changemakers working on it. Join Chloé and guests as they tap into their passion about equity and rights for all. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Changemaking podcast on ITSP Magazine. And today we're going to talk with the three co-founders of Respect and Security. Before I begin, I would like for each one of them to introduce themselves. Lisa, how about you go first?
Hi, I'm Lisa Forte. I'm one of the many co-founders of Respect and Security, and I actually am a partner in a cybersecurity firm as well.
Hi, Chloé. I'm Nikki. I'm one of the co-founders of Respect and Security as well. I'm also the marketing manager for the UK charity, the Cyber Helpline, as well as a global channel manager from an MSSP here in the UK.
And hi, everyone. I'm Funda, and I'm one of the co-founders at Respect and Security, and I run my own communications business as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for being on here. Let's just dive right into it. What is Respect and Security?
So Respect and Security is a group of individuals who got together as volunteers to come and take a stand against sort of all forms of harassment that we see prevalent in the industry across the world and across all different types of cybersecurity and information security jobs. And so we got together to try and make a change, really.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, I think, there's a lot of talk in our industry and probably across many industries, right? Around harassment, online bullying and other types of harassment, and what we do about it. And a few of us just got together and thought, okay, that's it's all very well talking about it, but what are we actually doing about it? Like, what can we put in place that will actually help facilitate some change?
I remember seeing basically your launch on Twitter, and I was extremely happy to see it. I know for myself, and I know plenty of other wonderful people in our field have definitely dealt with some discrimination practices, some bullying, some harassment, and it's gone to a point where we have such a revolving door. And I was wondering what has been those personal turning points for you that really empowered you to form Respect and Security?
Well, I think for me, my personal story was as my profile grew online, I started to get more and more trolling, more and more abuse. And it culminated in people essentially actually stalking me to the supermarket and taking photos of me doing my shopping in a supermarket and then sending those with abusive or threatening messages. And it started to just get really out of hand. And one thing that really struck me was I reported it to the police. I spoke to lawyers. I spoke to all sorts of people about what I could do and what my rights were. And really, I was quite dismayed to discover that there wasn't an awful lot I could realistically do. And I think, speaking to the other co-founders, we were just sort of at a loss really as to, we can't have a solution. We can't have a situation where women or men or anybody encounters this level of harassment or abuse and there is no solution for them other than to just put up with it. That's not okay. And that's not what we want in our industry.
I think adding to that, I think one of the main reasons that I got involved was because of Lisa. We did a cyber house party back in beginning of this year, and there was a panel on there around online harassment, whether it be in the workplace or not. And it was harrowing to listen to. It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't nice. And I think that kind of thing goes on in an industry that I mentor young women to come into doesn't sit well with me. I don't think that I'd be doing my job as a mentor, encouraging people to come into an environment, into an arena basically that isn't safe for them. And quite rightly, as Lisa's just said, there has to be a safe passage for victims to be able to hold their perpetrators accountable. And that was my reason for getting involved in Respect and Security. And that's my aim, to give these people that, are being harassed, are being bullied, are being, isolated because of whatever the situation is, they've got a safe passage and a transparent route to go and complain to their employers or their perpetrators' employers.
It definitely, I mean, hearing your story, I'm really sorry that you're getting stalked at a supermarket and all of that. That's like my fear and everything, like reason I reduced everything online. And now I don't really share too much because of that kind of fear that could possibly happen. And how can companies get involved at this point? To really try to change the situation, because it's so ingrained that this is all okay still for some strange reason. And then when we try to get help for it, it seems like it's an echo chamber and no action is being taken upon themselves to change it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way that organizations can get involved in this in the first place is to really kind of look at what processes are currently in place or aren't in place at the moment for any potential victims of harassment to be able to step forward and share their story, but importantly also be heard, right? And for that to be taken seriously, and for there to be processes then in place to then take action based on those incidents. So what we're asking all organizations to do is to take our pledge, which basically commits them to a number of points that they need to address. Some of them are a commitment to working hard to eliminate all types of harassment, to have some of these processes become more visible to everybody in the workplace, and to work towards, having inclusivity at the forefront of their minds, and to actually empower people to step forward without, and importantly, step forward without kind of fear of, what will happen to me if I speak out? Will I lose my job? Will I ever be able to work in this industry again? Should I just stay quiet? So there are a number of things that organizations can publicly commit to, I guess, addressing. And taking the pledge to actually address these things, and we are currently looking at ways in which we can then revisit those pledges to see what changes have actually taken place since those organizations have said yes, we commit to making these changes, yes, we commit to creating workplaces that are free of anxiety and fear.
I think what Funda's just said is really, really important. And I think that changing a culture of a company isn't a small thing. It's not something that you can change overnight. And I think the really great thing about Respect and Security is that we are going straight to the top. And we all know that, behaviours within culture, especially within a workplace, are learned from leadership. So if we can do it from the top down, and then we've also got the individual pledge as well, which is obviously individuals within companies taking them. Hopefully, they will all meet in the middle, and it will just provide a much more inclusive culture, within the security industry for people to, thrive and work in.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you hear of folks going into the office and then experiencing harassment from their boss, and then not knowing who to go to. And then when you're seeking for help, that it becomes such an issue. And I think you are completely right about changing the company culture. This is like that first step where companies take the pledge, and then, they have to have ownership, that they will make sure that they will take the following actions if something were to occur. Do you guys follow up with them after they sign the pledge?
So obviously we only launched the end of July. So I think the plan is now we're putting together a framework around, what processes now do we follow? How do we quantify, whether these companies have actually, stepped up to the bar and they are making changes? And something that's been really positive for me in the last 2 weeks there's a company that have taken the pledge, and I've actually heard from 2 employees about change that's actually happened there. And the organisation that took the pledge, they're actually holding themselves accountable on social media and saying what changes they've made, what they have done wrong in the past, what they're trying to do now. And to hear employees from that company saying that they've seen a positive change from it after just 2 months is absolutely phenomenal. So I think if we can carry that on, we just need to, now we need to sort of mature and grow the pledge and look at the level of commitment that the employers that have taken the pledge are actually given to it. And I think that's the beauty of the pledge itself. It's very transparent and it's very open and it's very out there. So as an organisation, to actually take that pledge, put it on your website, advertise it around the whole company, you'd be kind of silly really not to carry out what you've committed to doing, because you could be called out at any time. And we all know that reputational damage, is catastrophic, especially in this industry.
And I think the other thing, that we've had some people who are unsure of the purpose and how we're carrying things out. And there is an argument, as there is with all voluntary organizations of this nature, that perhaps we're encouraging vigilantism. And the reason we set this up with the company pledge in the way that we have is because, firstly, we believe that the employer is perhaps the most sort of competent and perhaps capable organization to look into any allegations of harassment or abuse. But secondly, employers are bound by employment law in whatever country that they are headquartered in, and they'll have procedures for dealing with incidents. And that may well be that they sit down with the employee and they talk to them about their behavior and it's resolved in some other way. We are not mandating that, you get a report in from somebody and you immediately have to suspend and fire that employee. That's not for us to determine. That's for the employer to determine. So all the pledges is taking a public stand to say that they will take this seriously. We are not mandating that they have to act in specific ways. That's still very much up to the employer. So we are not at all proactively doing these things. It's a passive way of trying to improve the situation and increase accountability.
Yeah, and I think to add to Lisa's point, there may be some people there, maybe some people who are being slightly cynical and saying, well, who says that organizations are not taking this seriously? We did actually, when we first launched, and ahead of launch, just to kind of, get a feel for where we're at within the industry, we launched some independent research amongst, men, women, non-binary groups to determine, what are people's experiences out there. And obviously it was an anonymous survey and it was independent. And, the feedback was very clear. I mean, it was over a third of us in this industry had experienced some sort of harassment. And while, a huge majority said, oh, yeah, my organization has some sort of anti-harassment policy in place, nearly half said actually they could do a lot more in telling us what this actually is. What does that look like? And also, what do you, as an organization that I work for example, define as acceptable behavior and what isn't acceptable behavior, right? That is a big kind of area that needs to be clarified. So that, we sort of had those stats in mind when we kind of went about setting up the pledge and asked companies to commit to it.
So the next question I have for you is, what are your goals for right now? And then what's your goals within 2 years' time?
So it's quite funny because when we launched, we actually picked a number. I think it was 50 pledges that we wanted. And we said it would be great. Wouldn't it be fantastic if by December, by the end of this year, we hit 50 pledges? And I think we're now at almost 80.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. We've already smashed our first goal. So I think one of the key things we really, really want to do is to encourage more companies to take the pledge. And this isn't just cybersecurity companies, cybersecurity service providers. This is also end users. Anyone who hires a SOC, for example, or in any information security individuals, people who are in our industry, if they're employed in your company, this is something you can do. This is a pledge you can take. In fact, we have pledges on our website from companies that are law firms, for instance, that are, whose business is not cybersecurity. So it's open to any company, and we really, really strongly hope we can get more people involved and more companies involved in taking the pledge. So that's one of our goals.
100%, Lisa. And I think as well, our next plan is obviously we would like to have a board of advisors. Whether that's going to be called a board, it's very formal, I don't know. So obviously we need to look at that. We want the board to be diverse, and to represent all areas of cybersecurity. And the other thing, I think we're going to start looking at doing town hall events where we can have people come and talk, whether that be victims, whether that be people that have taken the pledge and realised errors of their ways, that kind of thing. We really want the whole community to be involved in this. We're all very busy people. All of the co-founders are very busy people and have lots going on. We felt this was important enough, though, to take time out and to put this together. We want it to be for the whole community, and we want the whole community involved. And I think it's important to remember as well from the community that harassment takes very, many different forms. And I think as an individual taking the pledge, we have to be conscious of the fact that what I might perceive as funny and a laugh, the person sat next to me might find offensive. That isn't necessarily, that doesn't make the person that said it a perpetrator. It just means the perpetrator needs to understand their audience more, or the perpetrator needs to understand the impact of what they're saying. So the more feedback that we can get from individuals especially is paramount to where we take now, respect and security, what journey we go on, what can we be doing better? How can we change the framework that we're laying out for organisations, to benefit more, victims of, any kind of abuse within security. So I think short term, that's the plan. Long term?
That is a very good question. Well, I think to add to the short term, maybe, and into longer term, we obviously we don't want this to be a one-way street either. So we're very much looking forward to getting some feedback from organizations as to how we can evolve the pledge, what is working, what isn't. And, I think what's important to us as well is that we like to guide both individuals and organizations to places where they can seek more, whether it's support or information or assets and things like that, because there are obviously organizations out there, and they're different in each country or region, that are very much specialized in certain areas of supporting victims, for example. And, we don't ever claim to be experts in that, but we would like to be able to facilitate and to guide both organizations and individuals, I guess, to the right places.
Yeah, definitely. And off the back of what Funda just said as well, it's really important from us as well to hear back from organisations, whether they've taken the pledge yet, or they're thinking about it, or they haven't yet taken the pledge. Come and talk to us and give us feedback of, what you're struggling with. If you've got sort of a slightly toxic culture and you're aware that you've got that in your organisation, come and speak to us, and we can thresh it out with you. We can help you thresh it out. Why is it like this? What changes can we make so that we can competently take the pledge and with conviction. So yeah, it's all about feedback. We've done it for the community, for the whole security community. So everybody's input is really important to us.
I absolutely love how much of incorporating having that feedback loop that basically all of you are discussing. That is so incredibly important, especially for something so sensitive of nature as this in many ways. And also hearing that, since you guys launched, you just launched fairly recently, and already there's companies that are like apologizing for bad behavior and taking on actions and being public about it, which I feel like that's one of the things that we need to do more of, is to acknowledge our mistakes and then move on from it. I think when we hide from our mistakes, they come crawling back in many ways, and it becomes like a repetitive pattern in many ways when it comes to companies. So it's all great to hear that respect and security is really starting that conversation, having this conversation start of why we need to do this. Now, I was wondering, how can conferences get involved? Because that's another issue that, many of us in the industry have experienced, is that we have dealt with situations where we felt unease or unsafe when attending conferences?
Yeah, so we actually have, if you go onto our website, you can view the companies that have already taken the pledge. Their logos are on our website. We actually have a load of conferences that have already taken that pledge. And, it's very easy to start to talk about harassment and abuse as solely online and limit it solely online, or even limit it to sexual harassment and abuse, right? That becomes the default approach to a lot of these things. But actually what we found is men, women, non-binary people, every single type of human being imaginable is capable of perpetrating abuse and is capable and could be the victim of that abuse. That can be physical. Obviously, that hasn't been over the last year, largely due to COVID and lockdowns. But, there's been a lot of situations where that has happened. And, this doesn't extend just to Twitter or just to LinkedIn. This is across the board, harassing behavior in the workplace to employees or to interns that perhaps, deserve to have that safe space. And I think, we're very, very passionate about trying to involve conferences, but just bringing that awareness across the board that things, are harassment and abuse if that person takes it that way. And I think one other thing that has come out a lot in a lot of the interviews we've done, especially with magazines and whatnot, is people have said, well, how do you differentiate between harassment versus a joke, or harassment versus something innocent that was taken the wrong way? And this is a really valid question. And it's a really gray area. And it's a gray area that a lot of the law in the United Kingdom, in the United States, across Europe, has really struggled to grapple with. However, we would argue that in this current situation, we have cases of absolutely outrageous abuse and harassment that is nowhere near that gray line whatsoever. And if we can just get rid of that, we have improved the industry exponentially.
100%. And I think from feeding on from that, inclusion is really important. And that's just as much about respect and security as what harassment is. And, during lockdown, I noticed that a lot of people that I work with in my day job, would do like Zoom chats or Zoom beers and things like that. And there were certain people that I know that I've been there in person many times for many years that were never on these Zoom chats. And because they didn't drink for religious reasons, they were never invited. Now I'm back out in person meeting these people, and I've said to them, I was like, God, I missed you last year. Do you know what I mean? Didn't see you at all. And they're like, we were never invited. Now that group of people that didn't invite them, they didn't invite them because they thought they were doing the right thing. But by not inviting them because they thought they would offend them because they were all drinking and we were having beers on Friday night because we were stuck at home in our pajamas, having done that, by doing what they thought was right as a sales team, in fact, what they'd actually done is completely excluded 4 people who were part of that team. And it felt really, really rubbish for them. And the worst thing was on a Monday, when they all have their sales meeting on the Monday morning, everybody would be on the Zoom, in all their little boxes, like the Muppet Show, all talking about what great beers it was on Friday. There's 4 people sat in that Zoom call that they'll then feel completely segregated and isolated. That's as much about what we're about, respect and security, as it is about harassing somebody. It's the same thing. Just think about your actions and think about how they could be perceived. We all know people in the industry that we're friends with, and we know what the boundaries are. If you're in a group of people where you don't know where the boundaries are, just double think before you make that joke.
And I think that brings me on to one other point that I really, really think is important to mention. And I think, a lot of us have been in a situation, and I include myself in this, where someone has been called out online. Someone has said, this person has done something horrendous to me. Let's all pile on them, chase them down, criticize them publicly, and so on and so forth. I've been involved in that. I regret the actions that I took. I thought I was defending a friend historically, and I've done that. I'm guilty of that, and I'm sure most people have witnessed or been part of those things. And one reason for respect and security is to say, actually, Twitter, for example, is not a court, and people who are on Twitter are not a jury. That's not what our purpose is. We don't have the right to pass judgment, chase somebody off Twitter, make them delete their accounts, dox them, even if we think that that is completely justified, there is more appropriate avenues to go down to seek some sort of action against somebody who you believe has harassed you, abused you, wronged you in some capacity that was sort of out of order. And so I think we really want to sort of get get rid of that mob mentality as well, that people think is justified, because essentially it boils down to trolling in the exact same way.
You almost then become, if you become involved in pylons on social media, my personal opinion is you've almost become as bad as the perpetrator, because by attacking that person that you believe's done something wrong, and don't forget that that person that they've actually done it to, there's always two sides to a story, so you don't know the full story there. It's on Twitter, and you all then pile on and attack this person. All that group of people that think they're doing a good thing have actually now become the bad guy, and they're perpetrators. You've trolled somebody, you've hounded them because they've done something that you believe's wrong. However, in your reaction to that, by piling on like that, you've now become as bad as that person.
Exactly. I mean, I just think of, when someone is being under attack, they get defensive. They're not listening. When we're being attacked, usually we'll yell back even louder, right? Or we will defend ourselves. And that ends up being a situation where communication isn't happening anymore. We're not having a recognized listening conversation. And so you don't really do too much when it comes to change, because the thing is, you're trying to call out this person for them to recognize what they did, but at the same time, they're embarrassed and concerned and scared. And so they get defensive. And then this becomes one of those things where the person may never be able to, get back out there and so on. And so it's good to have these conversations in so many ways. But it is one of those things that I feel like it's incredibly easy for people to do. And so what are some other suggestions that you have for those that would usually call someone out on Twitter? What can they do instead?
I would personally say refrain from passing judgment and then passing judgment publicly. If you have an issue with someone, ideally send them a message and discuss it with them privately. It doesn't need to be a big public display. If someone has harassed you or abused you or whatever, go onto our website, look at the signposting that's available of the options you have to go and seek some sort of avenue for relief from that. But don't go and sort of publicize it and encourage others to come and help you sort of hold someone to account. Because like I said, we're not a jury, we're not a court, we're not a judicial system. Those things are already in place in every country we live in. That is not Twitter.
Love it. All right. So my next few questions is for everyone, which is, how can people get involved, individuals? And then we already covered how can companies get involved, which is basically take a look at the pledge, review it with HR, review it with your team, and then go forward with it, making those policy changes. But what can people in our community also, how can they get involved?
So in the community, how can they get involved? So if you don't like your employer's, basically route to for complaint about individuals within the firm, etc., you don't think that they are particularly inclusive culture, or you don't think they really listen to employees' negative comments, basically, then maybe encourage your HR department or your line manager, or if you're close enough to the seaboard, to basically take the pledge. As an actual individual, though, just take the pledge and the individual pledge, and just agree that we work in the security arena, and that it should be a safe and secure and supportive place for us all to be. And ensure that your behaviour actually upholds that belief. I think that's quite important. And also just to agree to not harass or abuse others. And it sounds like a really simple thing. And when I've said it numerous times to my kids, and they're like, but that's just what we do, mum, as human beings. And it's like, no, I think we've become so we've lost all inhibitions behind a keyboard. We suddenly become, warriors, so to speak. And we do forget to be kind, and we do forget, that one comment, that person, I put a post out about it today because I saw some really horrible stuff on Twitter this morning. And I think that one comment to that person, you have no idea what that person's going through at the moment. That could be the tipping point. Do you really want that on your conscience? Think about what you're saying and just be kind and be a decent person.
Completely on that front. I think the one thing that people tend to forget is that you don't know what you're going to say, how that's going to impact someone. And I've definitely have had conversations where folks are, literally scared to be online and scared to be in the community because of what has happened to them, or they receive a comment and they just keep thinking about it. And then they have suicidal tendencies, and that comment just destroyed them as a person. It's scary.
Sorry, Chloe, that in itself is harrowing. When you think about the last 18 months, and there are so many people globally that have been actually shut away on their own, in a complete isolation, complete lockdown, and probably the only friend that they've really got is through, their computer, their laptop, their tablet, their phone. And then to them feel like that they've done something wrong online, it's the worst thing in the world. And I agree completely with what Lisa said earlier. I mean, I've been known to stick my two penneth in. I'm not backward in coming forward. I'm not embarrassed about that. However, I do now think twice before I post something, because if you're that person that is sat on their own and they are, in such a really, really bad place, just that one comment tips them over the edge. That's just horrific. If they've come to Twitter, for support, for just company, anything like that, they might not have anybody. And then to have a dog pile go on them like that, and then something really bad happens, how would that make everybody feel? Nobody would feel great about that. So just don't do it. Just always think you never know what that person is going through. You've got no idea what their situation is. Just be kind.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and we as an individual, if whether it's you who's affected, or maybe it's somebody who has been affected or is experiencing sort of abuse or harassment, we again on our website, there's a section where you have a bunch of resources you can head to, and Nikki is an active member of one of these organizations we list there called the Cyber Helpline in the UK, and there you can sort of, depending on what it is that you're going through, you have a whole host of contacts and organizations that can hopefully, help you at least during the initial phases. And so whether that's for you or somebody it's worth having a look at our website for those resources as well.
And it's important to note as well, respecting security. If you're a member of the security community, you're never alone. And I think that's really important. And I think if we can end this interview on anything, it is the fact that we've done this to make sure that nobody in the security industry ever feels isolated, alone, and like they've got no route basically to help them. No one's ever alone.
I think this is the perfect moment to end things. And thank you all so much for actually taking action about this situation. I know myself and many others are completely grateful for that, because we've all had that moment where we are looking at a rotating door and just wondering if we're next because of everything that has happened in our industry in many ways. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to get involved, go check out respectinsecurity.org to learn more, and also get your company to sign the pledge. It is the bare minimum that you can actually do to try to make a difference today. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Changemaking Podcast with Chloé Messdaghi. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.